Hello. Today I've got a couple of stories we can learn from. The first fable is The Frog and the Scorpion. A frog was hopping along the shore of a river, looking for a place to cross. He came upon a scorpion sitting on the shore. "Hello, friend frog," said the scorpion. "It appears you are looking to cross the river. I too want to cross. Would you mind carrying me?" The frog was taken aback. "Why, if I let you on my back to cross the river, you'd sting me and I would die. I don't think I'll do that." The scorpion immediately replied, "There's no logic in your concern. If I sting you and you die, I will surely die as well. Since I can't swim, I wouldn't need a ride if I could swim." The frog thought a moment and then said, "Your logic makes sense. Why would you kill me if it would result in your death? Come along and climb on my back, and we'll cross this river together." The scorpion climbed on the frog's back, and off they went to cross the river. About halfway across the river, the scorpion raised its tail high in the air and stung the frog. The frog was both astounded and disconsolate. "Why did you sting me? Now I will die, and you will surely drown and die also." The scorpion replied, "I can't help it. It's who I am. It's in my nature." What do you think about this story? What can you learn from this story? The message that we're supposed to receive from it is quite straightforward, that scorpions will always sting you and you should never trust them. And if I was with a group of people, I'm sure that's what they would say, and that would be the end of it. But it's not the end of it. If we are to evolve, we have to start thinking new thoughts, to be brave, to open our hearts, and to be creative with our intelligence, and of course to say what we really feel. There is one answer that comes from the social face that everybody accepts in this world where nobody wants to learn anything. People no longer see life as a place where you learn. Life is a place where you live and die. Who knows what the meaning of it is? But on the spiritual path it's different. We are evolving. We use this opportunity to grow. So let's wrestle with this story a little bit and see if it can give us an opportunity to open ourselves to something new. Now that I have said what everybody expects me to say, what I was taught to say, in a world that never really cared about what I really felt. What do I really feel? What is my real assessment of this simple story of the frog and the scorpion? Well, here are some of my ideas. Isn't it the frog's fault? How can the frog act surprised? Such a person who's so naive will cause trouble. I don't know for what reason he can put aside the sting on the scorpion's tail, but he's not somebody who can be trusted. He's a lunatic. He has ideas behind his head. As for the scorpion, he may have a strong instinct to sting, but can he not tell the difference between his lunch and his survival? Another thought I have is, why do people tell this kind of story to each other? Is it that we can always blame the bad man, and the bad man can never change? And the bad are always bad, and the good are always good? And that there is no change, there is no learning? Isn't that powerless message the point of this story? The reason why people tell it to each other? It's like all those theatres that we see in politics, where they pick out from the world a bad man, blame everything on him, bomb him, start wars, and everybody in this theatre is satisfied. Both the tyrants and the oppressed, everybody's satisfied because they're playing the same song that mankind always plays. There is good and there is bad. We are the good, and nothing ever changes. And they have lost the ability to change. That's what thought I have about the use of this story. I also note, I looked this story up, that this story is changed from a very early Persian fable that had a completely different meaning, although the same setting. I find these teaching stories to be quite interesting, like those ancient puzzles, to allow the mind to open in a new way. Maybe not my mind, but my heart. When you go through school and your education, how many people really allow you to be flexible and creative and explore what you feel and think? How much of your life is really based upon giving the answers that everybody knows you should give? I mean, it's strange to stand back and to see that in every dialogue, everybody already knows what the answer is, because it's like playing the greatest hits of humanity. Nobody is allowed to think for themselves. And Gurdjieff would say, of course, that energetically, thinking for yourself and taking the risk to express what you're feeling inside as an individual, the energetic flow is very different inside. And to be brave enough to do that, to recognize it as your duty to tell the truth or to explore who you are through this portion of life, that crystallizes inside your centers data for future development and for the triam as a camnum. The correct functioning of your consciousness relies on you using your individuality to engage with life. And if not, individuality is never formed, and you live in self-calming, repeating the greatest hits of mankind's theatre. Now, the second story comes from Gurdjieff when he recounts the life of his father. And his father had a good friend, Dean Borsch, who used to come to the house late in the evening. Here's Gurdjieff. I consider it indispensable to describe a certain procedure established between these two men, who had lived normally to old age, and who had taken upon themselves the obligation of preparing me, an unconscious boy, for responsible life, and deserve now, by their conscientious and impartial attitude towards me, to represent for my essence two aspects of the divinity of my inner God. This procedure, as was evident when I later understood it, was an extremely original means for development of the mind and for self-perfecting. They called it castoncilia, a term derived, it seems to me, from the ancient Assyrian, and which my father evidently took from some legend. The procedure was as follows. One of them would unexpectedly ask the other a question, apparently quite out of place, and the other, without haste, would calmly and seriously reply with logical plausibility. For instance, one evening when I was in the workshop, my future tutor entered unexpectedly, and as he walked in asked my father, "Where is God just now?" My father answered most seriously, "God is just now in Sari Kamish." Sari Kamish is a forest region on the former frontier between Russia and Turkey, where unusually tall pine trees grow, renowned everywhere in Transcaucasia and Asia Minor. Receiving this reply from my father, the dean asked, "What is God doing there in Sari Kamish?" My father answered that God was making double ladders there, and on the tops of them he was fastening happiness, so that individual people and whole nations might ascend and descend. These questions and answers were carried on in a serious and quiet tone, as though one of them were asking the price of potatoes today, and the other replying that the potato crop was very poor this year. Only later did I understand what rich thoughts were concealed beneath such questions and answers. They very often carried on conversations in this same spirit, so that to a stranger it would have seemed that here were two old men out of their senses, who were at large only by mistake, instead of being in a madhouse. Many of these conversations, which then seemed to be meaningless, grew to have a deep meaning for me later, when I came across questions of the same kind, and it was only then that I understood what a tremendous significance these questions and answers had for these two old men. My father had a very simple, clear, and quite definite view on the aim of human life. He told me many times in my youth that the fundamental striving of every man should be to create for himself an inner freedom towards life, and to prepare for himself a happy old age. He considered that the indispensability and imperative necessity of this aim in life was so obvious that it ought to be understandable to everyone without any wiseacring. But a man could attain this aim only if, from childhood up to the age of 18, he had acquired data for the unwavering fulfillment of the following 4 commandments. First, to love one's parents. Second, to remain chaste. Third, to be outwardly courteous to all without distinction, whether they be rich or poor, friends or enemies, power possessors or slaves, and to whatever religion they may belong, but inwardly to remain free, and never to put much trust in anyone or anything. 4. To love work for work's sake, and not for its gain. On my spiritual journey, I have learned to do things that people cannot do, and that I couldn't do. It was not easy. I had to listen to my teacher for thousands of hours, over and over, with him carefully explaining very subtle things inside, subtle shifts, the difference between how your heart feels, the center of feelings in the middle of your chest, and what is the difference between that and the feeling of presence in your abdomen, or alternatively in your head. Subtle things. Being guided into a hidden valley, a different ability that we don't have but we could have. Especially today when people are so materialistic, which means they live only in the dream given to them by society rather than from themselves, from their own experience. All of life is simply a journey through which I can grow. And if I don't grow, I will fall. And I must take these opportunities. And the difficulty of spirituality in all the traditions, whether they are praying or meditating or studying metaphysics and so on, is to do things that you cannot do now. One part of that is to actively push forward using some technique or method and giving it great intensity. Great intensity. Have you ever done anything to the utmost of your ability, unto death? Have you ever done that?